In this video, I'm going to give you some really useful tips for drinks photography. What's up YouTube, and welcome back to my channel. My name's Amy, and on this channel we talk about everything to do with food photography. And although this isn't specifically food, drink photography is a really big part in the food photography industry. Drinks can be a really hard thing to photograph sometimes. So you've got unpredictable liquids, you've got glass which is reflective, you've got shadows, all sorts. All of the things that can make it quite tricky when shooting, you have to deal with drink photography. Just like with food photography, there's so many different ways to photograph drinks. There's no really right or wrong way of doing it. So some of these tips are only going to be relevant to this shoot, I suppose, and if you want to go ahead and do things in a different direction, that's completely up to you. These aren't rules, they're just tips. So if you're starting out and you've never shot drinks before, follow these tips to help you, but you definitely don't need to stick to them. Some of them tend to be really helpful and relevant in all drink photography though. For this shoot, I decided to go ahead for a really nice Valentine's Day theme, and I used the background I made in last week's video. So take a look at that if you want to give it a go. And as Valentine's is coming up, I'm going to go for a really nice pinky, girly, lovey-dovey theme. So stay on to the end of the video to see exactly how this shoot turned out. But I'm going to get ahead and get into the tips. So tip one is quite relevant with what I just said, and that is to have a plan. So my plan before I went into the shoot was a Valentine's Day theme. And although a theme is important, there's a lot more you need to consider when planning your shoot. When shooting drinks, time isn't unlimited. It's going to get condensation, your background's going to get wet from that. It's going to start to look a bit sad. If you're doing a fizzy drink, the bubbles are going to go. It's going to get flat. If you're doing something like a beer, the head's going to go. And you don't want your drink sat there for a while. If you're using ice, that's going to melt. It's just going to start to look a bit sad. Having a plan in mind can help you speed up the process when taking your shoots. When I make a plan, I plan out what props I'm going to use, what backgrounds I'm going to use, exactly how I want my hero shot to look, and I will draw out the plan I have in mind. So sometimes just getting that in your mind already makes it so much easier to put it in front of the camera. And looking at my drawing, obviously I'm not an artist. This is not perfect. You don't need it to be super delicate, these little circles of rose petals. You would never tell if I didn't label it. Tip number two. You'd think it's really obvious, but honestly you'd be surprised with how many people don't think of this before they go ahead. You'd get a glass out the cupboard and it looks clean to you, but what's probably not that noticeable before you go ahead and shoot it can be really noticeable on the camera. So make sure you've given your glasses a really good clean. And also use gloves. So I've had like the blue Cook gloves when I'm handling glasses to stop getting any sort of fingerprints on them. It might not look very obvious to you, but as soon as you open that picture up onto the computer, you're going to be kicking yourself if you've got a big fingerprint there. I use microfiber or lint-free cloth to polish the glasses down to make sure there's no little bits of lint, because these can seriously be a really annoying thing to have to edit out in post. Tip number three is to use a glass that makes sense in your shoot to your drink. Other than the fact that if you don't, you're probably going to get bartenders telling you you've gone wrong because they're quite fussy with what drink goes in what glasses. But it also helps identify the drink. A lot of drinks tend to look quite similar or completely the same, and the only reason we know what it is by what it's garnished with or what glass it's in. If you poured water into a martini glass, it's going to look like a martini. It's not like with food photography where if you've got a bunch of food on a plate, you can visually see exactly what's in there. If you've got a chicken, it's going to look like a chicken. If you've got peas or tomatoes in there, you're going to be able to see them. Sometimes with drinks photography, because it all can just look like liquids in different tones or transparency, you need to kind of give it a bit of a help by putting it in a particular glass. I was doing a prosecco shoot, so I put my prosecco in a champagne flute, prosecco flute, a flute, which is what it would generally be served with if you were going to a restaurant or a bar and you ordered it. This helps you know that that fizzy liquid in the glass is not just a fizzy drink. It looks like prosecco. Tip number 4 is to add texture to your scene. So as we're shooting liquids and they're in a glass, we don't really get much texture. It's obviously they're all quite smooth. It'd be different if you were doing something like a cappuccino and it's got like the frothy texture on top. But generally speaking, drinks are quite textureless. They don't have much texture going on, and glasses can be quite smooth looking as well. So to add texture to your scene, try to add in a few props or a few garnishes and food ingredients and things to your image to give it that texture, but make sure they make sense. Just like I've mentioned in a few videos, we want your props to add to your image. You don't want them to be distracting from the drink, and this is quite easy to do when doing drinks photography because drinks are a bit dull and textureless sometimes. So just make sure you're not going overboard. A really good thing to add to drinks is a garnish, because a lot of drinks will be served with garnish. This can be like a mint leaf, lemons, fruits on top. I went for something really pink and girly, and I went with candy floss. So I seen there's a bit of a craze going around to serve prosecco with some candy floss on top, and I thought that would make a great picture for a Valentine's Day theme. So that really texture-rich candy floss on top of my drink really draws your eye to those drink. I also used a few little rose petals as it's rose prosecco, and the bottle I picked, although it's at the back, I got a really nice textured bottle. So I made sure there was plenty of texture going on in my image, but none of it is really distracting you from the main subject. It all just kind of adds in to my story that's going on there. Another really great way of adding texture to images is things like salt or sugar around the rim of a glass. So when it's like dipped in lemon and then dipped in the sugar or the salt, that's going to add that really nice texture around the edge of the glass, and it just looks absolutely brilliant in photos. It goes really well with quite a few different drinks. Also, you've got things like olives on top, so they're quite smooth and shiny, but they're definitely going to add that nice interest and that smooth texture onto the top as well. So my 5th tip is a lighting tip. One really good thing to try with a lot of drinks, especially if it's more clear and liquid, is to backlight it. Having the light coming through the back of the drinks really just makes it glow. So to do this, just place your light directly opposite the camera, so your subject is between the light and the camera. The light is going to shine right through that drink, and then into the camera you're going to get a lovely glow. This also helps you minimize the crazy highlights and reflections that can sometimes cause a problem with drinks photography. This isn't a die-hard rule. There's definitely some drinks photography where side lighting 100% works better, especially if the liquid isn't that see-through, because you don't want to cast too many shadows and have a really dark front of the image. If you are having problems with shadows on the front while using backlighting, just remember to whack up a reflector in front of your subject, so just below your camera or above your camera, just to bounce some of that light right back into the front of the image to help with them harsh shadows if you want a more softer look. That is all the tips for today, guys. Here is my drinks photography shoot, and as you can see, I went for a lovely girly pink rose prosecco with some candy floss. This drink wasn't just absolutely tasty, I think it looked super cute and girly. I went for a completely monochromatic look, which is not normally what you go for in food photography, but I thought that pink lovey feel just made so much sense for this time of year. Using a monochromatic type of photography helps the emotion of the colour come through a lot more than if you concentrate on using contrasting colours. That's everything for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it or you learnt something new, give me a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below what drinks you've shot recently. Subscribe to the channel if you are interested in improving your food photography, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.